Let's step way back into the early days of human civilization, long before the first coin was ever struck. Now, back then, the ingenious, yet ultimately doomed, barter system was our absolute only method of trade. Sure, it was a totally functional solution for a world without a standardized medium of exchange, but as societies grew more complex, well, its mechanics became a massive bottleneck to progress. To truly understand the invention of money, we first have to understand exactly why barter failed. To really grasp the mechanics of early barter, I want you to imagine trying to negotiate the exact exchange value of a modern bicycle for a laptop today, entirely without a price tag. I mean, how many bicycles equal one laptop? Who even decides that? That intense, subjective moment of exchange negotiation was the absolute core mechanism of early barter. Goods or services were exchanged directly for other goods or services. Value wasn't just a fixed number you could look up. It was fiercely negotiated right there on the spot. So following the Neolithic Revolution around 10,000 BCE, barter actually allowed specialized groups to trade their surplus output. And, it worked incredibly well for small communities. Fast forward to 3000 BCE in ancient Mesopotamia, and you have these bustling local markets frequently swapping barley, wool, and metals. But here's the kicker. By 1500 BCE, rapid urbanization pushed this entire system to an absolute breaking point. The fundamental flaw was that value was never, ever fixed. It relied purely on momentary negotiation, which was heavily dependent on the scarcity, demand, and quality of the goods right in front of you. Because of this, trying to trade across long distances or exchange goods between completely different industries imposed a heavy, frankly exhausting burden on anyone trying to do business. It wasn't just a simple swap, right? It was an energy-draining debate every single time you needed a resource you didn't produce yourself. This brings us to friction 1, the coordination problem. When desires don't align. At the very heart of barter's failure is something called the double coincidence of wants. For any transaction to successfully happen, both parties have to simultaneously possess exactly what the other person desires. Without this perfectly exact, simultaneous alignment of needs and goods, the trade completely collapses. It's a massive technical inconvenience that stood as a literal brick wall to human economic progress. Picture this. A fisherman has a really great catch. He's got extra fish and desperately wants a new axe. He meets a toolmaker who has plenty of axes, but the toolmaker wants wheat. And to make matters worse, he's allergic to fish. Because their wants don't coincide, nobody gets what they need. The trade is just dead in the water. Because of this constant mismatch, instead of a simple, clean transaction, people were forced into what we call a frustrating chain of dependencies. Imagine a farmer who just wants an axe. Step 1, he has to trade his grain for a goat with someone who actually wants grain. Step 2, he takes that goat and trades it for larger livestock. Step 3, he finally finds a toolmaker who wants livestock and makes the trade for the axe. He's literally hunting for middleman trades, wasting immense amounts of time and energy, all just to acquire a single tool. And ironically, as human civilization advanced, this problem only got worse. As our skills became more specialized, individuals began producing a much narrower range of goods. You weren't a generalist anymore. You were a highly skilled artisan of one specific thing. Because of that, achieving that double coincidence of wants became incredibly rare. The better we got at making specific things, the harder it became to trade them. Moving on to friction 2, the math problem, inefficiencies in value measurement. Without a price tag, every single item has to be valued relative to every other item. This creates a massive combinatorial problem. If you have 10 different goods in a market, you don't just have 10 prices, you need dozens of overlapping exchange ratios just to figure out how they all relate. One shirt might be worth 2 chickens, or hey, maybe it's worth 5 kilograms of rice. A bicycle might be 10 shirts or 1 goat. It's a giant puzzle. Attempting to memorize and calculate these tangled webs of value in a bustling, loud, chaotic market was entirely subjective and incredibly inconsistent. You didn't have a calculator in your pocket or a standardized ledger. You had to constantly guess and negotiate if the 5 kilograms of rice you traded for a shirt was actually a better deal than the 2 chickens. It was mentally taxing and just highly, highly inefficient. Fascinatingly, though, early human ingenuity actively tried to tackle this. By 3000 BCE in ancient Mesopotamia, they were searching for a common language of value. They tried to overcome this exhausting math problem by using silver as a conceptual benchmark to standardize their accounts. They would value a rug or, say, a basket of fruit in its equivalent weight of silver, even when absolutely no physical silver was changing hands. They were just desperate for a way to overcome the uncertainty of subjective negotiation. Which brings us to the tipping point and the solution: smoothing the friction. Between 4000 BCE and 1500 BCE, we see explosive population growth and urbanization in places like Egypt and Mesopotamia. People were no longer just trading with their immediate, next-door neighbors. Trade was now moving across vast distances between complete strangers. And when you trade with strangers, the personal community trust that the ancient barter system relied upon is completely destroyed. You suddenly need something way more concrete. To survive and continue expanding, these ancient empires absolutely demanded efficiency and comparability. They adopted commonly accepted reference units, prioritizing clear accounting over situational negotiation. Over in Egypt, grain began to serve as a vital benchmark for state-controlled distribution. Meanwhile, in Mesopotamia, the value of everyday items like barley was formally expressed in terms of a specific weight of silver. This crucial shift marked the birth of what we call proto-money. It was an incredible leap in human logic, honestly. By adopting these standardized reference units, they totally transformed exchange. It was no longer a stressful situational negotiation where you might get ripped off depending on the day of the week. It became a predictable, objective process. The agonizing, progress-halting frictions of barter were finally being smoothed away. By successfully solving the double coincidence of wants, and by eliminating that exhausting combinatorial math problem, humanity laid the essential groundwork for money exactly as we know it today. Barter was just the beginning of structured trade, but its glaring limitations were the ultimate signals that pushed us toward this next great leap. So as we wrap up this explainer, we know the extreme limitations of barter forced us to invent conceptual proto-money, but it leaves us with a totally fascinating question. How exactly did we transition from using abstract reference weights on a ledger to actually trading physical, universally accepted treasure? How did everyday goods like salt, grain, and eventually gold actually become the world's first true physical tools to store and transfer wealth? Keep that provocative thought in mind, because understanding that leap is going to change how you view every single transaction you make today.